even though we're not where we want to be, and we have a decent bit of road ahead of us to get where we need to be. But there is rivers that have improved. So to me, that suggests we can do this job if we get the right resource in the right place and we support farmers, because lots of farmers were kind of wondering, what do we do to solve this problem? And all they said is, we need a little steer in the right direction. You tell us what to do and we'll do it. But they need the detail of that, and that's what we're going to try and provide for them. Unfortunately, in the indicators report, some of the rivers have declined, but some have improved. So it's up to us to get them all to improve. That's the goal, and that's where the water quality campaign is going to come in. So we know what can be done. It's just we need to get the right resource in the right place.
Hello, I'm Stuart Childs, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. For this week's episode, we're after joining forces with the Environmental Edge. So we've Cathal Somers and Deirdre Glynn, who are working in water quality area within Teagasc. Cathal has recently been appointed as the Water Quality Specialist. And we just want to talk to you both today, folks, in relation to the new water quality strategy that Teagasc has brought out there recently. So I suppose just for a bit of context first, Deirdre, I'm going to put it to you maybe about what water quality is like currently around the country, just to put it into facts and figures. There's a lot of talk about it being good, a lot of people arguing then that it's bad. What's the reality around it?
Okay, Stuart, thanks for having us. So I suppose under the Water Framework Directive, we've been tasked with achieving good water quality by 2027. So up to now, so that's a European piece of legislation. And then Ireland, as an actor for that, has the River Basin Management Programme. So we're sitting at somewhere around the 54% good water quality, which is quite good from a European perspective. But, you know, Irish government and European policy are driving us towards this good status. So 54% is, you know, it's not particularly good at the moment. So we're holding our own, but not going in the right direction. So all the EIP reports up to now have been, you know, indicating, so different sectors in Ireland or different areas in Ireland have nitrate as a pressure, phosphate as a pressure, or sediment as a pressure. And sediment's actually a very, very big pressure throughout the country. So we've been on the ground since 2019, but the Teagasc ASSAP, the Catchments Programme, have been there for up to 20 years. So we work with the information and the science that they've put in place over the last 20 years. So they've been assessing water and putting different mitigation actions in place throughout the country over the last 20 years. Then we came into being in 2019 because we weren't going in the right direction, and the indicators reports have been saying, you know, we're sitting around 53 or 54%. That's not good enough. We need to achieve more. And I suppose the other element of it as well is, you know, farming. The farmers of the country own about 70% of the land, and they probably are a pressure on it, you know, but there are other pressures as well. And I suppose over the course of our programme, the ASSAP programme that came into place in 2019, we were able to see, you know, with scientific analysis from the Law Pro team, the scientific referrals that we get from them, you know, that, you know, it's not just agriculture, okay? Then you have the whole thing of, you know, diffuse agricultural pressures and point source pressures from different things within the whole farming strata. So we had the ASSAP, the ASSAP programme in 2019, and now we have the Waters EIP programme coming into place. So as you can see, you know, Teagasc and Ireland in general have been focusing on water quality over the last 20 years and putting systems and actions in place to try and remediate pressures over the last 20 years.
So basically what you're saying with the 54% being good, we're good in a European context, but we need to be better.
We do need to be better, yeah. So they're looking really for us to have, which is a huge target, to try and have all waters at good status. So we've missed a couple of deadlines over the years, like in 2015 and 2021. So now our next target is 2027. And I suppose if you look at nitrate and phosphate and sediment, some of it in different areas is easier to fix. So like a phosphorus or a sediment pressure within a certain area might be easier to fix with the goodwill of everybody in a particular area. Okay, whereas the nitrate, it takes time once you've put actions in place to see an actual benefit to water quality, it just takes that little bit longer to see it. Whereas the phosphorus, once you've put in like taken out drinking point axes or putting in riparian buffers or attenuation areas in front of water courses where P and sediment is a pressure, you see the actions and the water quality status improving quickly.
So the nitrogen is obviously the difficult one to fix. So
it is in the southeast, particularly because of the type of soils that we have. Yeah.
Okay. So Cathal, I suppose as I said at the outset there, the reason for talking to you today was the launch of the water quality campaign a couple of weeks ago. Give us a quick introduction to that. Like Deirdre's obviously outlined there that there's a lot been going on down through the years. So what's this water quality campaign going to bring to the table that the other stuff hasn't done, we'll say?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of work been done already, Stuart, and we're going to build on that with water quality campaign. But just going back one step before I get into it, I'm just looking at the EPA indicators report from 2023, and that tells us how we did in 2023 as regards improvements or declines. So it's not all bad news, even though we're not where we want to be, and we have a decent bit of road ahead of us to get where we need to be. But there is rivers that have improved. So to me, that suggests we can do this job if we get the right resource in the right place and we support farmers. Because I was only up at the Johnstown Castle event there yesterday, open day, and lots of farmers were kind of wondering, what do we do to solve this problem? And all they said is, we need a little steer in the right direction. You tell us what to do and we'll do it. But they need the detail of that, and that's what we're going to try and provide for them. Unfortunately, in the indicators report, some of the rivers have declined, but some have improved. So it's up to us to get them all to improve. And that's the goal. And that's where the water quality campaign is going to come in. So we know what can be done. It's just we need to get the right resource in the right place. So the Minister McConaughey asked us there a little while ago, just to at Teagasc, I suppose, to pull together a campaign. So it's a multi-actor approach it's basically based around an advisory campaign. So we're going to work with farmers, trying in a multi-actor approach, where we're going to pull everybody that's involved in agriculture into the place. Anyone that has anything to do, anyone from the farmer all the way up to the meat industry, to the dairy industry, to anybody that has any influence on farming, to try and get that message out to farmers and help support them on the ground. You can imagine, like, advisors on the ground, we have plenty of contact with farmers, but we can't get in everywhere and give that time to really fine tune what can be done. ASSAP, for example, is a great example of what can be done if you can go one-to-one with farmers, spend all your time helping those farmers, and we can see improvements in those places. So we're going to try and expand that on a bigger level, and I suppose use everybody that's involved to help us out. So really, the core of it, what we're trying to do, like Deirdre said, we're going to try and get all the water bodies up to the stats we need. We're going to support farmers to try and show them techniques that can improve the farms. And even in those difficult areas where nitrogen is a problem, where, how we can put several different things in place to try and solve that problem, and build on the really good work that's been done before. And I suppose I'm going to go back to this multi-actor thing that I'm saying, and I keep saying it to people. A lot of people are working on water quality in agriculture at the moment. A lot of people are working in their own little silos. You have the likes of ourselves, ASSAP, our own advisors. You have the likes of the co-ops now are doing a lot of work as well there. You have the likes of the Blue Dot catchment programs, the ASSAP catchments. A load of people are doing lots of things, but we need to pull them all together. And that's going to be the big thing. Pull everybody together so we're all pulling in the right direction. And I suppose we've come up with a couple of things now. The campaign is big. It's running from 2024 to 2030 and beyond that again, but 2030 is the big one. We've kind of put 6 key pillars in place that we're going to target over the next number of years. And I won't go into big detail now at the moment, because what I really want to talk about is the name of the campaign is the Better Farming for Water campaign, and 8 actions for change. So we've actually picked out 8 actions that we think are high impact that farmers can do straight away that will give us a lot of results that we require to get where we need to go. But part of the 6 pillars to get there would be, stakeholder engagement, trying, get to the farmer and help them out where we need. We need to build a lot of awareness, not just amongst farmers, but amongst our own advisors and in the industry as well, and help support the industry to help farmers as well. A lot of upskilling will be involved there, and will we even hit that at student level as well? Our knowledge transfer program, and you've seen it already this year, where we're doing a lot of work on knowledge transfer to get, that water quality message across there. There's even I suppose in our BIS campaign this year, there was a lot of water quality information went out to farmers of that. Our research program is ramping up. We have a lot of research there again, but we're going to get that into technical information that can be utilised on the ground practically for farmers to apply it. And we have a new catchment researcher being hired there at the moment as well, and a big communications plan to try and get that message to the ground. A big part of this new campaign is we're going to have 6 catchment coordinators across the country. They're going to be based in the Boyne, the Slaney, the Bardinore, the Shore, the Blackwater, Lee, the Bandon. So a good spread across the country. And what they're going to do, their role is, I mentioned all those actors involved, trying to pull all that together and try and, get us to target the right information in the right place. Because a lot of what we do anyway is just get the right measure in the right place, and it's just trying to pull everyone together.
The important thing about those catchment coordinators is that they actually span across a number of counties, and there's lots of stuff, like you said, there are lots of people doing lots of very good work in individual areas, but these people are now going to have to pull every actor, as the term is for them. So as you said, every industry person, everybody that's involved across these, from where the Blackwater rises behind in Kerry, basically where it goes into the sea in Youghal. People are going to be engaged in that all across the counties that are involved in there. So there's obviously Kerry, Cork and Waterford in that situation. So it's trying to, a whole river approach effectively is what that catchment is talking about.
It is, yeah. You're after really hit the nail on the head there as well, because if we think of Ireland as being a whole country and we have to solve all our water quality problems, it's very hard to think of it in that way, but we need to think locally. Your local catchment, your local river, your local farm is attached to a local river, and that's where we're looking at, giving farmers local information, not this national information, because you know yourself, Stuart, if I was telling you about a river the far side of the country to you, it doesn't really bother you, but your local river is where you're interested in. So we're going to be able to give you information. We can even do it already, and we've started to do it with farmers, where I can bring you right to your farm. You give me your air code, I'll stick it in. I'll give you your local information. I'll give you the type of pollution that you're probably more susceptible to. I can nearly give you kind of ideas and techniques on how to solve problems on your farm without ever even setting foot on it. We have that technology already, and that's what we're trying to roll out to farmers. So local level, your local catchment, your local level. When we think about a catchment, maybe some farmers might be familiar with what a kind of catchment is, but the way I describe it is, think of it like a basin. So all the water in your local area, your local parish, it falls into one area, into one river, and that's kind of a catchment. That's kind of the basic concept of it. So if we can solve our own problem in our own area, that'll help us across the country. But to do that, we're after bringing up these 8 actions for change, and I suppose they're divided into 3 different sections. So one is kind of nutrient management, one is farm area management, and one is land management. And the nutrient management one is, like, farmers will be probably sick of us talking about this, but like, I even just had a chat with a couple of farmers yesterday, and they said, geez, you're always telling us about lime and P's and K's. And I was kind of saying we are, because, when you look at the national figures, we're not where we're meant to be. And it's really important, particularly for the south and southeast part of the country, that we get the P's and K's and limes right, because if we can grow our crops better, we can utilize more nitrogen. And if we're utilizing more nitrogen, then we can reduce losses to our rivers. But a big thing as well to think back on is, I'm going to go one step. Some of the farmers on the dairy edge will be familiar with, and the environment edge will be familiar with AgNav, which is a big new system coming in. And AgNav is going to provide us with really important details that we're talking. A lot of farmers, particularly for nitrate loss, is on our nitrate surplus, our nitrogen surplus at the back end of the year, and we're coming towards that now, and even our nutrient use efficiency. But the big messages we have for farmers at the moment is, if you're banking nitrogen every time you apply, and you get to the back end of the autumn of the year, and there's a bank of nitrogen stuck there, and the sunlight is starting to deteriorate because it's getting winter time, the temperature's cooling down, growth rates are getting lower. If that nitrogen is sitting there into the winter, into autumn and the winter, there's a high chance it could be lost. And the Agricultural Catchments Programme has shown us that over half our nitrogen is lost at that time of the year. So it's those type of messages, and that's not good enough for the likes of an ASSAP advisor or a specialist to say, It has to be coming from our private planners, from our general advisors on the ground to help those farmers with all those little things that will help reduce, I suppose, understand how much is coming off the farm and understand how much chemical fertilizer we need to put on to supplement that. It's a big thing.
I think there's been huge learnings as well from the ASSAP program that feed into this whole action program for change. To be fair, wouldn't it? Would you think, Cathal?
Yeah, there is a lot of what we're talking about actually. Just what I mentioned, the eight actions for change. A lot of that's based around ASSAP work.
Yeah.
Just give you an example, the nutrient management ones it's reducing purchased nitrogen and phosphorus per hectare. That's number one. Number two is ensure soil fertility is optimum for lime, phosphorus and potassium. Number two, three, ensure application of fertilizer and organic manure at appropriate times and conditions. And we might talk about that a bit more in a second. That's a massive one, particularly in the year that's gone by. The weather was so bad. When we get into farmyard management, number four, have sufficient slurry and soil water storage. So I know for a lot of our clients at the moment, that's a big one, trying to get a handle on that. Number five, manage and minimize nutrient loss from farmyards and roadways. Another difficult one, particularly, on existing farms, on farmyards, getting the design right is a big one. Land management onto number six, fence off water courses to prevent bovine access. So for any of our non-derogation clients, I suppose that's a big one. We're trying to get the cattle out of rivers. Number seven, promote targeted use of mitigation actions such as riparian margins, buffer strips, sediment traps. Just mitigation to stop sediment phosphorus loss. And that's a massive one that ASSAP advisors have built a huge bank of knowledge and will, I suppose, help out with other advisors and private planners and industry share that knowledge. And the final one of the 8 steps is to maintain, not to forget, it's not all about the grassland tillage. I think we've about 330,000 hectares of tillage across the country. And the big losses in tillage are phosphorus and nitrogen. So we're looking for green cover over the winter, particularly cover crops. It's a massive one. And this, for example, the slaying, is one of our bigger issues with nitrogen. And there's a lot of tillage around there, so we need to get a handle on that as well. It's important.
Those cover crops are to mop up excess nitrogen that you're talking about in terms of that surplus, Cathal, yeah?
Yeah, it does a savage job. Like that surplus there, that mops up for winter, and then when it comes into the following year, you can till it back in, and it's there. You can reutilize that nitrogen. But there's another thing it does. Even on the most free drain land, I've land at home. It's in Barley. You could drive on in the winter time, but if there's not a cover crop on that in the winter time, the cover crop acts like an umbrella. So when the hard rain comes, if there's not an umbrella there, it washes phosphorus sediment out the field. You'd see it. Anyone that drove around in January and February, you saw that brown water. If there's brown water coming out the gate, that is a problem. And it's you might as well say it's euros flowing out the gate. It's phosphorus going out the gate.
The Teagasc Tillage are doing a whole load of events now in the next couple of months about awareness about cover crops and their importance. So I mean that's very, very good. All sectors of Teagasc have bought into water quality, and the messaging, the common messaging then coming from our specialists and our advisors is going to be very important going forward. But it's great that there is so much buy-in to water quality.
And Deirdre, just coming back to Cahill's point now, where he said about farmers saying to me yesterday about this repeated message about soil fertility and so forth. I suppose there'll be concern now when people will hear about reducing purchased nitrogen and phosphorus, because obviously the year that's in it now has been a tricky year to grow grass. Obviously I'm coming from the grassland side of things more so than the tillage side, but they've had their own problems to deal with as well, and the tillage side obviously as well this year. But why are we harping on about the soil fertility? And that's basically the question that was been put to Cathal yesterday by that farmer. Like, why do you keep going on about this?
Well, from our perspective, if the nutrients aren't used by the grass, or if they're not used by the crops in the ground, if there's an over application of nutrient, nitrogen or phosphorus, or poor utilization of nitrogen and phosphorus on farms, well then we're seeing it in the groundwater quality, the nitrate levels being up in water courses, the phosphate and the sediment and ammonia levels being up in different water courses, because the crops haven't benefited from them. I suppose say here in Kilkenny at the moment, I think we've something like 62% of soils at optimum level, which is quite good. The figure nationally is not as good. And I suppose if a farmer is asking you, why do you continuously harp on about soil fertility and the importance of soil fertility and knowing their soils and what's the status of the phosphorus and potassium in them, it's unusual. That farmer obviously got the message, but an awful lot of other farmers are not getting the message because, the stats are showing that, and if there's poor utilization, it's a conversation that all of our advisors here, I can only talk about Kilkenny, but they put huge emphasis, not just with irrigation farms, but also with with their other clients on the nutrient management program on the Teagasc one, and proper utilization of nutrients, looking at the status of their soils and putting plans in place so that there isn't, because they know the knock-on effect to water quality and obviously emissions as well.
The big issue here this year, and I suppose what I'm getting a lot is it's getting harder to grow grass or crops at the moment. It's harder to manage it because the weather is changing. I suppose the point I'm making now, and we've had climatologists on the Environment Edge, and the weather is changing. It's probably here to stay. It's going to get more erratic. It's going to get more difficult farming, and we have to, I suppose, adjust our practices to suit that. Like take this year, for example, the year gone by, wet back end. There was grass that should have been grazed the back end and never got grazed. Went into the spring, couldn't get grazed again because it was so wet. Even at dry places, it was hard to get out. You have farmers with the cold, that northwesterly wind all this year. Growth has been shocking. We had touches on droughts. We had to put out a drought newsletter about 3 weeks ago, because there was some place in soil moisture deficit of plus 60. And then all of a sudden, a week later, it was wet again, but it's still cold, no grass. So you have farmers that are feeding silage throughout the summer, throughout the highest growth, where we should have had highest growth rates. You have massive amounts of concentration being fed into parlours because the grass is not growing. And then on top of that, then because of that, our pea allowance is going to suffer next year because of it. And now we're in the predicament that we need to build our peas. So you have all these things coming at farmers, and it's really difficult to solve. But the one problem that it all boils down to is we can't keep blaming the weather, because whatever the river data says at the EPA at the end of the year, that dictates all the regulation. So I suppose for the first, I remember 2018 was the big drought, and we had a bad impact from nitrate after that. But we weren't used to those unusual weather. But it's getting more common now. So it's coming to the point now whereas we can't blame the weather anymore. We're just going to have to act around it. And there's certain land is more resilient than others, I suppose, and certain land is more appropriate for higher stocking rates and other land is not. And I suppose what I would have said to farmers yesterday, and it's a hard thing to say, is like, we can't control weather, can't control the soil you're on, you can control your management practices, and unfortunately, and I'm a farmer myself, sometimes the decision you have to make is not the one we want and it's not the one we like, but that's the way we're going. And it's just every year with the weather, it's getting that bit more tricky, and we have to come up with solutions to help our farmers to cope with that, because it's difficult for us as advisors to come up with solutions. You can imagine how the farmer feels on the ground. They're firefighting all the time, so we have to bring solutions to the table for them.
I don't know about you lads, but I suppose I've been out on farm visits now for the last couple of weeks, Stuart and Cathal, and a couple we're in a nitrate vulnerable zone here, and we've, as part of the actions or mitigation actions, we've asked farmers, to grow clover, to try and pull back on the nitrogen applications over, say, June, July, August period. But in the last couple of weeks, the farmers have all been complaining to me about the clover, that it's not growing the way it is, it's not producing the nitrogen that it's supposed to have produced. And even with the best will in the world, and they're putting these actions in place, the weather is kind of mitigating against them in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I'd say you can't disagree with anything you've said there, Deirdre, and you can't disagree with the farmers either, because there's no doubt about it. The clover just hasn't stepped up to the mark in 2024 at all. But Cathal has probably alluded to why it hasn't, the wet spring. So clover, John Maher's always spoken about clover being a second half player, so that it's the second half of the year that it really does its work. It's been cold, obviously, for a lot of the year, and it's cold through the summer as well. And I was talking to Mike Egan the other day, and he basically summed it up quite well, I would say, is that the clover contents right now are very similar to what they should be in April, basically. It's from what they can see on the Clover 150 program. So it emphasizes, for me, that emphasizes the importance of being dynamic, I think, in farmers, in that they have to recognize that the clover isn't actually playing its part there, and then they do keep on with the nitrogen in the short term, maybe to try to keep grass growing. That's not to say that it would have either, no, because as Cathal said, that northeasterly wind has killed everything basically in terms of growth. But like there's just a bit of, before it was spread nitrogen, grow grass, graze grass. That was it. Like now there's a little bit more to it. There's a few decisions to be made on an ongoing basis. So it is a challenge, but I think, and again, picking up on something that you said there, Carl, as well, in terms of the high levels of concentrate that are going to have been fed this year, the impact that that's going to have on phosphorus allowances next year. How much does that emphasize that people have to, regardless of whether they soil sampled in 2024, they have to soil sample again in 2025?
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
why that we really have to start moving away from this concept that every 4 years is okay, because the high performance farms, be they tillage, beef or dairy, they're using a lot of nutrient on their farms. We've seen, you mentioned K earlier, Cathal, like we've seen K levels drop on from index 4 to a high index 2 in one year, basically because of high offtakes of silage. And like,
Yeah.
if that's not replaced, efficiency's gone, nitrogen has been spread and it's been lost, or it's not been effectively used. So I think people need to get into the mindset that at the very minimum they're going to, or at the very least they're going to soil sample every 2 years, in spite of any schemes or anything like that, if they're going to really keep track of what they're doing to try and fulfill that nutrient management piece of the actions for change that you spoke about, Carl. Yeah.
Well, even if the farmers think that we're banging the same old drum about soil fertility, that just emphasises how important the communication strategy is going forward. We have to keep that message going.
We're victims of our own success on the farms. Our farmers have become so good at growing grass and crops at the moment. And you're right, Stuart, a couple of years ago would have got away with that 4-year soil test, but we're so good at growing grass now that we can't, because we're pulling stuff off it so well. And on top of that, then we don't like putting our animals in on grass at different, if it goes beyond where we want it to go in, we want to pull silage bales off, and farmers are doing that because they're becoming really good at grassland management. Because of that, then sometimes those silage bale fields, and particularly in silage ground in general, are maybe not topped up as much as they should be. And so how can you top them up unless you're soil testing? But we, as asset advisors, when I was an asset advisor, I generally, before going to any farm, particularly the higher stock farms, I'd always pull up the fertility summaries. And I was always shocked at how poor the Ks were. They're always the worst. Farmers are very, I suppose, considerate of trying to build P the whole time, because P is so hard to build. But K, you can top it up a lot quicker, but we kind of forget it sometimes. And it's as important, because if the legs of the stool are not right, the nitrogen is not going to be taken up either. So that's going to cause problems. But I suppose we've talked a lot about the more heavily stocked farmers the last couple of minutes, but there's a lot of farmers on the lower stock farmers have problems with water quality as well. A lot, myself, Deirdre are based in the southeast, and Stuart, you're down kind of south. We're used to that kind of land, but once you go up into the Midlands and across the west, we still have water quality problems there. Their phosphorus, their sediment, their pesticide problems, and a lot of our asset advisors are working hard on them. So it's not just that southeast. That's one of the major issues, obviously, with the nitrogen, and probably a harder one to solve, because I always kind of say it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. You have to put 1,000 plasters on it. It's lots of moving parts. It's not just one silver bullet. Whereas, like Deirdre suggested earlier on, if you have a cattle access point that's thrown out a river, you fix the cattle access point, and within 3 months that could recover. So there's lots of other parts to it as well.
I suppose the derogation farmers as well, they're so heavily regulated, and everything in nitrates is about water quality and reducing the impact on water quality, like the banding, the reduced nitrogen, the spreading periods, the 220. They're so heavily regulated that other farms down your 100 kg of organic nitrogen per hectare, they have impact as well, as Cathal was saying.
Yeah, so really everybody has to step up to the plate.
Everybody
You've
has to
already
step up to
mentioned
the
the
plate.
tillage sector
Yeah.
there as well as not being excluded from this or anything, but all grassland farmers, all tillage farmers, everybody has to get involved in it. I suppose, Deirdre, I have a couple of final questions. Maybe we're beginning to get tight on time. Like the sufficient slurry storage and soil water capacity, look, I think people should know that they need to have that in place now. And look, there are possibilities that there's going to be changes in terms of the amount of it and so forth. So
Yeah, and there's
there's,
massive confusion as well,
yeah,
Stuart,
what
between
soiled
what
water,
soiled water
yeah,
is and what grey water is. And,
yeah,
like that's a big, big part of our role,
yeah.
going out and how are we going to manage all this grey water going forward? And we're looking at different things. We've this waters EIP that's after coming in and it's fantastic. So it looks at, nitrogen pressures, phosphorus pressures, this piece in it for tillage ground. So there's money available for putting in like sediment traps, for putting in willow beds, anything to attenuate nutrients or to make a barrier between your farmyard and a water body or a water course or a drain. So there's, that's all going on. So it's very important to say as well. And like Teagasc have had been a big input into that. So you've had your ACP, you have your ASSAP, but now you have this Waters EIP. It was 50 million euro available nationally to farmers to put targeted actions in place to help farmers, to support them, to, do the right thing, with targeted advice.
Just going back to that slurry there, sure, for a second. Like, you raise a big point. Sorry, you probably want to make a point, but this is the time of year now to think about our slurry because, on paper you could have the perfect slurry, like you have enough slurry for your cows. But I always say to farmers or for your beef stock, I always say to them, it's not about what's on paper. Is what date do you normally have to go out and spread every year on a normal year? And that's how I judge if you have enough slurry. And what I'm finding on farms is on paper, they probably have enough and even a bit more. But if the yards are set up wrong, there's water getting into the tanks, or maybe there's big yard areas getting into tanks and putting them under pressure. So the management around, number one, get enough slurry storage for your beef or your dairy, and because we're getting such unusual weather, I'd be saying put another 20% on top of it. Once you have the ground open, make it as big as possible. And number two, then set your yard up so that you're not putting excess rain, clean water into your tanks, because we can't handle that issue around winter anymore.
Well, a lot of the inspections that are going on too at the moment, so you have your county council inspections and your nitrates inspections, they're actually measuring the tanks and whatever, and they are seeing that we don't have, especially the irrigation farmers, they don't have enough when you take the grey water or the soiled water into consideration. So there is, that puts pressure on people to get nutrient out earlier than they should do. And then that feeds into the whole management of nutrient, which is one of your 8 actions for change. You need to be able to bank that money, that slurry money for, the growing season, not have to, put it out when it could have, an effect on the environment.
I suppose, Carl, is that what Deirdre just said there, like that one of the first actions is the reducing of the purchased nitrogen and phosphorus. Like that doesn't mean that you can't spread it necessarily. It means that you just want to reduce the amount of bought in chemical fertilizer, which will actually feed into the surplus, which in itself is a whole other podcast, really. Like we can't get into that now.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
Deirdre's just said there about that banking of the slurry money, we'll call it, it's offsetting the spend on chemical at a later stage in the season, basically. But it doesn't. We're just moving around the pawns on the board effectively, really.
Yeah, but it's like any clover event or multi-species event we go to, and Mike Egan always answers this one really good. When someone says, I have clover in the field and it's powerful and I haven't put any fertilizer on it for the whole year, they might kind of say that. And Mike says, hold on one second now, how much slurry have you put on it? So the slurry is very valuable as regards nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but exactly what you said, Stuart. If we make all these brilliant improvements on a farm where we're doing the right things, we have to account for it's like an accountant. You account for every bit of nitrogen that's there. And look, farmers are there to raise families and make money. So if they can save money and not waste it on chemical that ends up in the river or an estuary anyway, that's where they should go going for. It's not just all about the rivers are a main part, obviously, from the environment, but if it's in the river, like there's a lot of money going down that drain, so it'll benefit everybody around.
Okay, so Deirdre, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up in terms of there's quite a lot of nutrient coming off the roadways, actually, more than you would have actually ever imagined in reality. And I suppose it ties in with the land management piece as well. Then we'll say the seventh point in terms of the actions for change there around mitigation actions. What advice
Yeah.
would you give to farmers that are listening in to us here today in relation to what do they need to do? I think there's a huge appetite out there from farmers now to engage with us. They just want to know what to do. I've met a couple of guys there. Tell me what we want to do. Cathal, you said it as well. They just want to know what action do they need to actually put in place to start making the improvements. But it's just there's so many things, like you said there, death by 1,000 cuts. They've been hit left, right, and centre. They're nearly punch drunk from rule changes, and they don't know whether they're turning left or right in a lot of cases. And all they need is somebody to catch them by the shoulders, turn them in the direction that they need to go, and say that's the way you're going, and they'll do it. Like, so if there was one or two pieces that you'd say to people that are listening into it today, what do they need to do? What are the next steps that they need to do to
I think that they
deliver?
need to engage, more with their advisors. They need to engage with their ASSAP advisors as well. So whether it's a beef advisor, a tillage advisor, a dairy advisor, talk to their advisors, get a plan in place and do it beforehand. Get their soil samples analysis, do their soil samples. Have a nutrient management plan in place. That's a massive first step. Huge first step, and that's going to save them money in the long term. And then have a plan in place, like your roadways. If you're in irrigation, or everybody nationally, you talked about roadways. The siting of roadways is a huge thing, and we're seeing that from inspections coming back here from county council inspections and cross compliance inspections. Is make sure that they're cambered away from water bodies, especially where there's slopes in place, and that's huge. Keep your buffers. Buffers is the biggest thing. If people kept to the cross compliance regulations, kept their 5 metre buffer when they're spreading their slurry, their 2 metre buffer when they're spreading their fertilizer, the tillage buffers over the winter period especially, and on establishment, buffers will protect water bodies, and we'll see good results from that. Where it's in place, it's working.
Okay, very good. So I think we could go on for longer, but we can't. So we'll have to call time on it today. So we might pick up on it on some of the individual elements of the Water Quality Action Plan over the next 12 months, maybe, just as I said, to give people the direction that they need. So thanks very much to both you, Deirdre, and Cathal for joining me on this week's episode, and we hope people will get value from it.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Stuart.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Deirdre Glynn and Cathal Somers for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.